The 26th of May is upon us, just under a third of the year since we last received any sort of content for Payday 3, and we finally have something new to play around with. And let me be the first to tell you, these new toys are far from insignificant. Update 14 is a fairly massive patch by Payday 3's standards, arriving with a new DLC heist, free classic weapon, and most importantly a completely revitalized armor system in Armour 2.0. These more tangible additions only scratch the surface though, as it's the dozens of balance shifts and quality of life tweaks that will likely make the greatest impact on your overall experience with the game in the coming months. Unfortunately, the downside of releasing bulk content patches such as these is that the content within is rarely coherent. In fact, that incoherence is dripped throughout even individual sections of the update, with the heist sometimes feeling like a regurgitated Payday 3 objective flowchart, and Armour 2.0 putting little thought into the stealth experience, placing the two best passives on the heavier 2 and 3 plate frames. That's why I found myself leaning on the works of Mary Shelley when coming up with a title to describe this one. The update is individually excellent, but Frankensteinish as a whole. It feels like they're tripping over themselves at times by making the game notably harder and more engaging, with well-targeted very hard and overkill balance tweaks, whilst also handing us new armour that trivialises the experience altogether. To be clear with you, I like this update, and I think it's more than just a small step in the right direction. In isolation, I recommend checking it out, even if you understandably don't want to spend money on the heist. I just wish it was possible to galvanise Payday 3 into the game it clearly wants to be, instead of flopping back and forth between trivial and frustrating. But just maybe, Update 14 gives us the embers of the technology to do so, becoming the modern Prometheus we so desperately need. I'm going to start this update coverage with my review of the new heist, Party Powder. However, if you want to see a specific deep dive into how the heist plays in both loud and stealth, I made a video discussing it in full linked here. The same is true of the next two content topics I'm going to cover, so be sure to follow the link in the info card if you want to know more. That said, Party Powder is the next side job, contracted by Shayu, as we look to take down a mutual threat in the form of the Palatucci mob, who have the New York police force in the palm of their hands, having raided the Triad's coat packing factory in the industrial outskirts of the city. The setting, theming, and execution of this one is top notch. Although its warehouse setting is somewhat uninspired, the actual layout and atmosphere on this heist is unlike anything else in the game. Sadly, the same isn't true of the gameplay loop, which Party Powder borrows from just about every single one of its base game predecessors, with QR code scans, keycard hide and seek, and thermite objectives propping up what is effectively a glorified Easter egg hunt for bundles of the white powder. They do change up the formula in places, with a PC hack and meth lab for extra bag cooking, but at its core, the objective loop of this heist is exceptionally uninspired from start to finish. It's evidently influenced by Diamond District, not only in its alliteration-heavy title, but also its loose, player choice-focused design philosophy, but without understanding what made that heist so refreshing at the time. Worth noting, it was also free and released alongside another sizable heist. Regardless of these obvious gripes and its lack of originality, Party Powder is a well-designed map and play space. Cop spawns, cover and flanking routes are all fairly top tier, avoiding the door camping loop that can become prevalent in loud Payday 3 heists, just so long as the cops don't get lost forcing open the garage doors. It makes for a fun combat sandbox even when the objectives fail to drive the gameplay forward. What I will also say is, favors on this heist go a long way to spice up the escape route, massively impacting how you'd optimally go about it. Instead of Twitch just inexplicably parking up the van in one of a few locations, they can either open up the sewers to move loot rapidly in stealth, or call in Bile to fly in an escape chopper on the warehouse roof or out in the train yard. The fourth possible favour marks the crates actually containing that titular Party Powder to avoid having to watch this animation on loop. My take is that the two chopper escapes should just be random variations built into the map, as they're wasted within the current clunky favour system. And that design decision would make even more sense when you remember they've done their best to add as much RNG as they can currently muster. As I understand it, it's impossible for them to actually vary up the physical layout of heists, a la Payday 2, due to how Payday 3's environments have been developed. But the design team have done their best to randomise loot and objective locations, warehouse entrances, and switch up the fixed meth cooking order, which is refreshing. This focus on RNG is particularly noticeable in stealth, where guard pathing feels far more organic than usual, with attempts actually switching up their locations somewhat from run to run. Overall, I would suggest stealth is the way to go in general on Party Powder. It draws the most out of the impressive map design and traversal options, whilst also fitting the setting of the heist perfectly. Were this a free edition, I think I'd be kinder to it, but I do think it's a tough sell without bringing anything original to the table. In fact, thinking back, it might be the most low stakes and unoriginal paid heist we've ever seen in this franchise, at least since Border Crossing, which is the apt comparison I saw people making in the comments of my reveal video. Undoubtedly created on a budget, it's certainly a try before you buy experience, in my opinion, if you have a friend willing to shell out and host. On an immediately brighter note, they actually brought back the Judge, renamed it to the even edgier sounding Justicar, and made it just as monstrously powerful as the meta-defining revolver shotgun from Payday 2. Expect one-shot kills even to the body at close range, satisfying medium-range one-shots so long as you're zoning in on the head, and utter dozer deletion when in their face. You'll be taking these guys down whilst flinching them in a single reload. Its attachment pool is also excellent and surprisingly impactful, including the return of the iconic Silent Killer suppressor. Whilst its general handling and feel is up there with Payday 3's best, certainly not a regression from Payday 2 in my eyes, in truth it's held back solely by a torrid ammo pickup rate, at least on harder difficulties where pickup across the board has been rebalanced. It goes negative by roughly a 1 to 3 or even 4 shot ratio, meaning it is the very definition of a sidearm, not a weapon to be lent on across the entire heist, unless you want to babysit it with ammo bags. As I mentioned in my more thorough review though, that is a bit of a balancing necessity, bearing in mind how well it fits into most builds as a pure dozer destroyer. Oh, and I did see a few people asking if it has a fire rate cap now after seeing the trailer and my gameplay last week. The answer to that is no. If you want, you can let loose a hailstorm of all 5 shots within a second. However, there are very few reasons why you'd want to do that the way combat is paced in Payday 3. Controlled, rhythmic fire is the way to go when dealing with the Judge's kick. Next up, and something you'll notice throughout all of this showcase gameplay, Armour 2.0 has pretty much uprooted how survivability in Payday 3 functions. More than any other, I seriously recommend you check out this video because it goes into much greater detail about each of the frames and plate types, as well as showcasing what I suspect will be some of the meta options once everyone gets to testing. The 4-plate frame with 3 impact followed by 1 classic blue plate feels far and away the strongest in case you want the TLDR. You can use a single armor repair kit and go from no armor to full in the blink of an eye, making you tankier than any previous build in the game could hope to muster. Anyway, for those sticking around, the Cliff Notes version is that the 5 previous fixed armor types in the game have now been replaced by 4 new frames, each holding 1 to 4 plates specifically. Each frame comes with a unique passive as well as default ammo and consumable stats, and must be loaded to maximum plate capacity, meaning passives are fixed to the number of plates you're running, which I do think was a design misstep. These passives are all fairly impactful though, and can allow you to do crazy things like drop limitless smoke grenades or heal up to full health in the blink of an eye. As for the plates themselves, we have the classic resistant plate from launch, now offering a massive 60% damage reduction, the shortest recharge timer at 1 second per additional plate, and not reducing your down counter in exchange for taking permanent trauma damage. The adaptive plate grants 30% DR, a 1.5 second increase to recharge time, and reduces your down counter by 1 per additional plate, but regens to full so long as it doesn't break completely. Whilst the new green impact plate trades off all damage reduction, increases your regen timer by 3 seconds and reduces your downs in order to always regenerate back to full even when completely broken. Impressively, all 3 actually have their own place in the meta. I'm personally still a massive believer in the adaptive armor playstyle, but even the blue plate lovers can rejoice. I love the overarching system, despite its complexity being off-putting at first. As I've said before, I think outside of a few obvious faults, such as all impact plates being repaired by ARKs, and the passives being a little inflexible, it's the ideal armor framework for Payday 3. The problem is that the game is simply not balanced to handle the player getting even stronger and more difficult to kill, and it just so happens that every single armor configuration in the game has been buffed from the prior update. Resistant and adaptive plates are strictly better than their prior versions, whilst Impact is strong enough in its own right to force Starbreeze into buffing the competition. As a result, almost all of the excellent balance changes I'm about to get onto have seen their initial impact muted. Even though the cops are getting stronger, the player is still outpacing them, meaning mechanics remain abusable and the game remains consistently easy. In some places, the value of the rebalance will be hard to notice through the near invulnerability certain armor compositions offer. For one patch, it's not the end of the world, but don't expect to load up update 14 and be challenged like never before. Sadly, it's quite the opposite once you get to grips with Armour 2.0. Speaking of those balance changes, just because they've been dulled somewhat by Armour 2.0's release doesn't mean they're not worth discussing, because they are undoubtedly a step in the right direction. First of all, I do think it's sensible to try this out solely on the harder difficulties of Very Hard and Overkill. I believe this is a data-driven decision, as new players can still find it hard to get to grips with the mechanics and need a safer space to learn, but veterans are in desperate need of a challenge. If you hear me mention a change but don't see it in-game, that is probably down to the difficulty you're playing on, so keep that in mind. Firstly, let's talk about the cop buffs. In general, expect to be flooded by more units at all times, as spawn rates have been increased, spawn flow has been altered to send specials at you earlier into the heist, and spawn caps have been lifted much higher, especially when playing online in groups of 3 to 4. A great example of this can be seen on Touch the Sky. Previously, dozers wouldn't spawn until the final objective, calling in the escape chopper, but now they'll start rolling in before you've even started decrypting the drive, making for a much tougher final section of the heist. I still hate special spawns being event gated, but this has gone a long way to allow special units to have their presence felt across all heists. Additionally, many of those specials can now spawn in greater numbers. Again, sticking with the dozer theme, you can see 2 at a time as standard, with Combat Duo on Overkill adding a third into the mix now. Most specials have also received notable buffs in terms of functionality. Snipers are the easiest to notice, firing roughly twice as fast after getting a beat on the player, giving you just over 2 seconds to find cover or take them out. In exchange for that, they have had their damage reduced by 1/4, meaning 4-plate setups can tank the shot, and the new impact armor is a natural counter to this armor destroying spike damage. Overall, they just feel like a threat now, without having that uncanny Payday 2 ability to drop you instantly. And with up to 3 spawning at a time, you will need to prioritize sniper control on most heists. Shields have also been given slight buffs, with increased total and visor armor, making them slightly harder to burst through for certain weapons, and pivotally, although it doesn't sound like much, zappers, grenadiers and shields have all been made much more flinch resistant, making it more likely for them to activate their special ability without constantly being interrupted. I already noticed more gas around heists, and occasionally got tased, which was an embarrassingly rare occurrence previously. To pair with these buffs to our nemesis, us heisters have also taken a hit, specifically in the ammo department. Prior to this update, the ever popular Car 4 would pick up 8 to 9 bullets per ammo grabbed, whereas now it's only securing 4 to 5 ammo per box, a roughly 50% reduction of pickup rate, which is pretty much the case across the board, impacting some of the lower DPS weapons quite heavily, requiring you to lean on your secondary, run the lower capacity compact magazines, or even bring ammo bags, which was previously unheard of. Of course, one potentially unforeseen knock-on effect of this change is a massive hit on the infamous ammo funnel skill. Because this skill loads ammo into your weapon equivalent to the amount picked up, when pickup rates fall, so does its effectiveness, making it much less of a meta skill than it once was. Ironically, this is a far more organic and understandable nerf than the original plan to just effectively remove it. I have no real complaints, and as they refine ammo pickup rates further, I expect this change to be even more appreciated. One slightly unfortunate outcome of all of this though, is that it has pushed the meta even further in the direction of the shotgun category, with the likes of the Pursuivant, FSA and Deagle still packing enough of a punch to virtually nullify the ammo pickup nerfs. So if you're looking for a way to play the game as if it were update 13, without any noticeable ammo economy pressure, those weapons remain the way to go. Not everything is moving in the direction of the cops though. In addition to the extra survivability now afforded to us thanks to Armour 2.0, overkill weapons have now been changed to compete with the instant activation of the overskill sociopath. Now, wherever you call in the Piglet, Red Fox or Minigun, it'll be directly delivered to that spot via a drone. This should massively up the usage of these weapons, which is well timed with all the extra specials running around the map. In addition to this, sentry skills have been buffed in a vain attempt to keep up with the player and cop power curve, whilst Assassin's Metal has been buffed to provide significantly more healing per kill when below 75% health rather than 50 as it once was. Conceptually, this is to assist the health-focused playstyle compete with the newly buffed Armour 2.0, but in practice, it just makes those already very powerful one-plate setups even stronger. On the flip side, armor-related skills such as Hardy and Plate Up have been changed to have no interaction with impact armor, which would have quite obviously broken the game otherwise, although the same isn't true of soft assets, so if you don't mind cheesing the cops with flashbangs, you can stretch that armor even further in a fight. To even the playing field somewhat, after all the cop buffs, our Krei are also receiving some love in the form of a 100% damage increase, 70% additional health, and double the resources within any equipment they place on a heist. The intention appears to be to better mimic the output of real human allies, although they might be just a little too good at this point, especially bearing in mind they can revive each other now. I'll be amazed if these guys can even go down on difficulties below overkill at this point, and their damage is notably more consistent, making them actual assets worth keeping at your side, at least when they're not busy getting stuck in the map geometry. In addition to these direct changes, there have been tweaks and bug fixes for things like Jacket's Sociopath Rampage screen being far too dark in certain environments, and the removal of the melee desync shot, which could be used to break the game in all sorts of unintended ways. Last, but by no means least, they have added a new set of Twitch drops available starting from today. I know these are always divisive, but if you do want to earn them in a relaxed environment, I will be streaming this update in full later this week. Even better, you can now spread the cosmetics you earn across your different builds, as each loadout will also retain knowledge of your current cosmetic setup and preferred heister, meaning it's much easier to theme builds and get a little more involved in the role-playing elements of the game. A genuinely wonderful change that might go unnoticed with so many other things going on in this update. So, what's the verdict? Well, as I said during the pre-release window, which was a lot more open this time around, if you can mentally separate its components, Update 14 is a lot of fun. Armour 2.0 is a wide enough reaching change to flood into almost all elements of gameplay, making most heists feel at least somewhat fresh. The Judge has been executed exceptionally, which is just as well as it's only the second free weapon added to the game in the space of a year, and the passive difficulty tweaks are a step in the right direction towards refining overkill into something that actually requires some coordination to pull off. However, if you can't take that step back, it all becomes a bit of a blur, an amalgamation that's hard to stomach in one package. Armour 2.0 bulldozes the more subtle balancing tweaks, you'll find yourself abusing the direct delivery of overkill weapons like the HET Red Fox to trivialise all the extra spawns, and it might be difficult to enjoy the Judge to its fullest when the bastard is always running low on ammo. This feels like a byproduct of months of update material ending up mashed into one incoherent content drop, losing any identity and coming across as an all-around confusing package. It's still worth checking out, but it's also an update that appears to need a lot of rapid iteration and hotfixes, which previously hasn't been possible for this shrunken dev team. If we could see another summer of content not too dissimilar to the flurry after the Boys in Blue update last year, Payday 3 could start to galvanise itself into an experience worth returning to for the long haul. But for now, I suspect for many of you, this is going to be a somewhat fleeting visit. I just hope management realise that's been driven by the way the content model is being handled, and limitations they themselves have placed on their own dev teams, not the actual content itself. Update 14 is well worth a look at, probably not spending money on, but enjoying for the Frankenstein's monster it is. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of the update now it's finally out in the wild, and how my coverage of this content has been handled. It's been quite interesting being able to share things in advance of the release date, but I want to know if it's been enjoyable and useful to watch, or if you've held off to avoid spoilers. I completely understand either way. Take care, have a great week, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.